Hello everybody, it's me as always, and I am joined by Lauren.
Surprise!
To talk about The Evil Within, to build up hype for the sequel that's coming out very soon. So this is basically going to be a spoiler cast way after the fact.
Spoilers.
So, I guess we'll begin. If you want to talk about the game, Lauren, and what you thought about it initially.
Well, I remember seeing trailers for it, and man, I must have watched those trailers like 20 times. I was so excited. I thought the trailers were amazing, and I couldn't wait for a survival horror game to come out. I really enjoyed it the first time I played it. I know it got a lot of bad reviews, and I could see like some of the points that people were making. The story was a little confusing. It wasn't just cut and dry, but I don't think many survival horror games have just like a clear cut and dry story.
Definitely not.
And I really liked it. I liked how the environment kept changing. You know, it wasn't just the haunted hospital or something. You were in the creepy woods, and then you were in the haunted hospital, and then you were in the spooky parking garage, which wasn't that scary. But I liked how
parking garages are kind of scary.
Well, they are, but I don't know. It was like the best lit area in the game too. But I really liked how the environment changed. I liked the weird transitions where you're like falling all this way down, and then all of a sudden you hit the ground, but oh nope, it's actually the wall, and you're just rolling. And I thought those were really neat.
It's a combination of like Inception.
It was very Inception.
And Resident Evil with
especially
like maybe
when you get to the end twist, it was like, wow, somebody watched Inception.
A tiny dose of like Saw and Silent Hill.
There's definitely elements of all of those. But yeah, my first thoughts of the game were very positive. I really liked it. It was what I was waiting for. I guess I hadn't played a good horror game for a while.
And it was on the new consoles. When the PS4 was announced, like, oh man, the loadings are going to be totally fixed now, and we're not going to have any kind of texture problems, and it's still the exact same things happening from the last generation.
Speaking of loadings, The Evil Within had some killer long loads.
It
had some terrible loads, but...
which makes the dying even more frustrating.
And so many one-hit kills. I think at the time that was my one, like, real bad thing to say is there were so many one-hit kills, and enemies would just randomly do a one-hit kill. Sometimes they wouldn't.
And a lot of them are kind of unfair.
Yes. I did mostly stealth. I mean, sometimes they'd see you, and I'm pretty sure some sections were just impossible to do in stealth.
I think initially, I can't remember, but I think I did like a lot more stealth originally because I didn't have that much ammo. And then the second time around, since it was New Game Plus, I had like a lot more. But it still wasn't easy the second time around.
It wasn't. And I was trying not to use like the rocket launcher for things because it was like, well, I still kind of want to remember what the experience was like, even though ammo wasn't really an issue.
Well... Sure, I guess that's a good sentiment, but
you didn't rocket launch everything.
I have a lot on my plate, and I was like, I want to replay this, but I also don't want to spend a lot of time in this game.
Granted, it had almost been 3 years since I played it, but I have forgotten a lot. I forgot like whole sections.
The whole dream thing I didn't have really a problem with, but replaying it again, I saw how many, not plot holes, but like how kind of convoluted it is if you don't like read what's happening. Sebastian doesn't like react to anything, which makes the whole experience like, you're in like this weird...
And I'm not sure if the not reacting was a story choice, a design choice, or... You know, they got Anson Mount to voice him, so I mean, kind of a big-name actor. Could they just not afford to have him do, like, all these extraneous dialogue lines, or,
So I don't think I have any problems with any of the voice actors here. It's just like,
you should
have more reactions.
It would have been nice if they had even touched upon some of the stuff that they did in the documents, and then the documents expanded on that more. While they touched on some of them, there were some that just never addressed, and it's like, I think that's kind of important.
Anyway, even though there's a lot of frustrating like one-hit kills and stuff, I think the core gameplay is
pretty solid,
very good. It is it really is Resident Evil 4.
When you get a headshot, it feels very satisfying when their heads just explode.
Yes,
that was very good.
I like all the monster designs.
I like all the monster designs.
I love the crossbow. That year, I think it was like there's a lot of games with like crossbows, and the Agony crossbow has so many like little cool things with it.
I really like the menus. Like I thought weapon switching and everything was good.
I also like that it was kind of more arcadey and that you had like a ton of guns on you. You didn't have to well, you have to have like 2 guns on you.
Yeah,
That's
and
all
then
you can
have to
have.
go to an item box. I just like that you could, whatever you found.
Because you are in like a dream, so I guess it technically makes sense because like all these supernatural powers are happening. So of course I'm going to be able to manifest these guns and whatever. But yeah, the upgrade system now is like very cool. It's just kind of weird that you're collecting all this ooze.
I'm glad that green ooze can make my gunfire better.
Yeah, the stat stuff makes sense since it's being injected into them, but the gun upgrades do not make sense.
It looks like in the second one, that's going to make a little more sense, where your parts are going to be used for your crossbow and upgrading your guns, and ooze is just going to be used for, like, your abilities, which makes a lot more sense than...
There's probably a lot of time constraints, probably a lot of budget issues, because this was, like, the first game from Tango Gameworks, I believe is the name of the studio that Shinji Mikami...
The cute little snail.
Made.
Very misleading.
Yeah, that he made just for this game. So I can understand. And this is, I can't believe, like, Bethesda helped, like, do this. But, yeah, so a lot of budget constraints. I'm sure there's probably maybe some plans for... Yeah, there's probably you're supposed to upgrade your gun other ways. It was like, well, we can only fit this one thing in, so let's just whatever. It's a dream anyway, so who the hell cares?
It didn't really bother me.
I think that's about it that I have to really say about kind of like
I'm sure we'll think of something as we're going
As we go through the story, like we'll talk about those water things later down the line. Okay, so the game begins. You're driving to the hospital with your new partner and your old partner. And some random cop guy.
Your chauffeur.
And you park, and it's a whole scene. The hospital has been attacked. There's so many dead bodies. So much dead bodies.
And they're talking about things that had happened before. They're wondering if it's like the same guy.
And then they
talking about all the patients that are going missing.
They meet the doctor. And then Sebastian goes to the monitor, and he sees the cops shooting at nothing. And then he sees like the warping around of Ruvik. It's like, what? And then all of a sudden he appears behind him, and then he's in that meat locker room. With
the sadist, yeah.
Yeah.
Hanging upside down. You gotta swing and cut yourself free.
So that gets transported, but somehow he's like completely like, oh, I'm in some...
You lose your cool trench coat.
Yeah, somehow you're totally fine with what's going on. I mean,
Ruvik injects him with something, so I assume he thinks he just passed out, and then this is what happened to him.
Passed out in a hospital, then somehow he's in some meat locker thing?
Yeah, with a bunch of other... Well, I guess his assumption would be, hey, this is the guy that killed all those people upstairs, maybe.
I guess. He's a cop. He's seen a lot, I guess.
Crimson City does not sound like a nice place to live. It's kind of like Chicago or something.
Yeah. I thought it was more like a Chicago thing than it is like in New York, in my mind. Anyway, eventually, like, you escape, and then you get to, like, the weird...
You hit the tripwire, which was cool in the first time you play it, and then every time after that, you're like, I can see it. Please let me disarm it. Disarming tripwires is a thing.
And then you get to, like, your safe room. So you're like, oh, now I'm in some weird place. And then you go through... That's when you go back to the real world?
So you get chased by the guy, you get dropped into the blood, and you escape the hospital... And
all right, you skip the hospital, and then the Inception 2012 thing happens, and you're trying to like drive away.
Kidman,
the doctor,
Connolly,
Leslie.
Yeah, the doctor and Leslie.
Everyone except for Joseph.
Yeah. And so you're driving out, and it turns into 2012 meets Inception as like the buildings are moving,
and they're driving away. And it's like, oh no, but it's still not as crazy as a reaction as I thought.
Everyone's still like, the earthquakes, man.
Yeah, earthquakes. The city's, like, caving in on itself. Like,
and
what?
There's no people. Like, all the buildings seem empty when you see inside the buildings. There's not people, like, running around on the street.
You know, speaking of, we were talking about Batman vs. Superman during dinner, that part where the reporter's like, good thing it's after business hours and everyone is home safe and everything is clear.
There will be no dead people.
There should have been a radio station that said, good thing it's a holiday. No one is in Crimson City. This time, everyone's in,
Everyone's in Amity Beach.
Yeah. Anyway, and then you wake up in, like, the forest.
Yeah, you crash and you wake up in the forest. But before you wake up in the forest, that's when you go to your safe room for the first time.
Okay.
And you meet Tatiana, I believe is her name, and that's the nurse who, like, runs the safe room. And basically, you're, like, in a cell like you'd expect to see in a creepy horror game mental institution, and she lets you out. And in the safe room, you learn how to upgrade your stuff. And not this time, but you learn about, like, the morgue lockers and back that you can open. And,
that's, like, way late, yeah.
Yeah.
I discovered that by accident with, like, the keys and stuff like that. But at this point, what were you thinking was, like, going on?
I had no idea. I did not think what was going on. I think I was just... I don't know what I thought. I think I was just playing the game, because I played for a couple chapters in one sitting the first time, and yeah, I was
crossing my fingers that it wasn't going to be some lame thing, like, oh, I was in an insane asylum the whole time. Yeah. I'm crazy. That's why I'm in a cell. It was just like an effect, essentially.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what I thought it was cool how you kept, like, kind of basically warping to new spots, but...
And then, so, like, this is the forest part, and then you meet up with other characters, and you're like, oh, we have to get out of here, or we have to find Leslie.
Yeah, you're looking for Leslie.
But you
meet up with the doctor again, and... It's
still like, oh, the city is caving in on itself. We fall like a hole, and now we're in a forest.
Forest in town, and it's not... You left a very modern, contemporary city, and you are in something that looks like it's out of the 1800s, early 1900s. And you're just like, all right.
I'm just in it.
Maybe there's like some like live action historical retelling center over there. Like we've got all of them up here where you can like, go and people are all in period dress. Maybe there's a big attraction, and that's actually just where you
Maybe there's actually a secret journal that we
missed, where it's like, oh yeah, the Renaissance Festival is in town this weekend. And
yes, Crimson City is known for that.
But yeah, nobody seems... Later in the game, you're with Joseph, and, like, they do make one comment, like, Sebastian's like, where are we? And Joseph's like, more like, when? And then they're just like, all right, let's move on.
He does say that, and then they don't go back to that.
Yeah, they don't address it.
And they're like, oh, they said it! Oh, but they're not going to go back to it.
After we summarize it, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline doesn't quite make sense.
Well, so after I guess we don't have to go through every single thing, but essentially, all you're doing throughout the entire game is trying to find the survivors of the ambulance and trying to figure out... Actually, you know what? They're not even, like, trying to figure out what's going on for a long part.
I assume they're trying to figure out what's going on, but they never talk about it. They never, like, make it like
it's mostly, they're just trying to gather the survivors. It's not like, let's get out of here. It's like, what?
And they're not even trying to do that. They're looking for Leslie, and it's like, oh, well, I ran into Joseph. Cool. I guess let's just go along this linear path. That's all we can do.
Oh, we're in this hallway now, and this weird, crazy woman is chasing after us, and then I'm falling through the air into several doors and upside down. And now I'm in a hospital
that I wasn't in before, but it's fine.
Like, at that point, when that scene happens,
that was such a cool scene.
I was like, oh, I gotta be in some kind of weird reality thing going on here. Which I kind of, because of, like, all the previews and stuff, I kind of got, like, an inkling of, like, that. But I was still, like, not sure exactly what was going on. And if it was, like, I was time traveling, or if it was in a mind, or a dream, or whatever.
Or you were just kind of doing a scary Inception, which is more what happened.
It's very late in the game when you kind of figure out what exactly is happening, that Ruvik is, like, the one behind all this. And he wants Leslie, and he had all these experimentations. And, well, actually, for like the doctor talks about Ruvik, but doesn't really explain him that much. He's Ruvik's behind this, and Sebastian's like, who?
And it's like, he wants Leslie, and they're like, why?
Yeah, why?
And to get that, you need to delve into the documents a bit more.
Yeah.
And also just kind of make some assumptions that you hope are correct, But
yeah, for the timeline, you're, like, warping all across these things. You're in the forest. You're in that big, huge, open, sunny, ruined city kind of thing. You go back to...
I do like that not everything was at night. That, you can have spooky stuff not at night.
Thankfully. There was the ruined city. There was the ruined city graveyard and the cathedral and the catacombs.
The catacombs, those were cool. You fight the keeper in the catacombs. That was a good fight.
And it's just like you're going through all these things. Like, you go through that the ruined city through the photographs. I'm like, what is this? Life is Strange. Obviously, I didn't think about that at the time, but now I'm like, oh, it's he can change the past now. So you still don't know what was even happening, because when you look in the photographs, then it's like, well, what really is going on? And then you get to the mansion and you figure out, like, oh,
you finally get some backstory on Ruvik.
Of course, he was part of some family that he hated.
He hated his family. He had a very religious father. He maybe liked his sister a little too much.
Did they? What do you mean by that?
Well, there was I think it was in the I read all the documents for the Kidman DLCs, and Jimenez is talking about how...
butt stuff going on?
Well, he didn't say that, but he just said that...
Ruvik, you're into butt stuff, aren't you?
It bordered on incestuous in one of the documents. But yeah, so basically what I get is that his father was like buying up all this land from, I don't want to say peasants, but that's basically what they were. They looked like 1800s, early 1900s peasants, and they got pissed, and they were going to burn down a barn to show them. And then,
except for that one guy's like, there's kids in there.
Yeah, then they were like, oh, there's kids, and this other guy was like, who cares? And they set the barn on fire, and Ruvik, and who's called Ruben then, and his sister Laura are in there. And they both get burned pretty badly, and Laura gets him out. She lifts him up and gets him out through a window, and she's trapped in there. And according to one of the newspaper articles in the game, she didn't die. She was in a vegetative state, but I'm not sure if she died later or if maybe she was still alive. I'm not sure about that.
I think that's probably what fuels Ruvik
and then
revenge and to maybe
and
make
then
some kind
his
of
father
cure.
like locks him in the basement and tells his mother that both the kids died in the fire, and his mother's going a little crazy because she thinks she hears him in the basement, and got real messed up, and then he just murdered them both.
Why wouldn't you just murder your son and your daughter if you're going to say they're already dead? Why don't you just like lock them in the basement? Why would you want to keep them alive if you don't want to have them be alive?
They didn't say this in the game, it's just my assumptions that it was Ruvik went a little crazy after his sister died, and his father was, you know, some wealthy, big to-do guy, and he didn't want to have the crazy son running around, so he just kept him out of sight. So he was crazy and disfigured.
I guess if he was religious, he doesn't want to like kill anybody.
Yeah. So, then Ruvik killed them both and staged a car crash.
They never say, like, what time period that happened.
They don't. It looks, like we said, 1800s, 1900s, but that just doesn't really fit with the timeline, because Sebastian's journals that you find are clearly dated, I think, starting in 2004 and going up through 2013.
Whenever the game was, like, released, it was, up to that point or whatever.
Sebastian existed in a contemporary timeline. Ruvik could have existed a bit in the past, because as you find out later, Jimenez betrayed him, they killed him, they took his brain, and they put it in the STEM machine, which is what everybody's actually hooked up to. But Jimenez knew Ruvik when he was younger, and he's just not old enough for it to have been early 1900s. So I just don't know what time period Ruvik existed in.
You know, we technically, do we ever see Jimenez, like, in, like, the real world? Because technically he could be, like, a super old man.
You see his dead body when Kidman and Sebastian come out of STEM, if that's real.
Okay.
But I assume in the Kidman DLC, she really did wake up in the real world, and you see his body. So, and it looks like the Jimenez you know in the game.
It could be just that Ruvik just likes old shit, but if you're seeing his memories...
It could be like a nation barrier. That's not quite the word I want, but like I could see like that. This game takes place in America, I'm pretty sure. I could see like a farmland area like that being in Europe, and maybe it's just kind of like.
Like I said,
this was made by Japanese people. Maybe I don't know, it makes it sound like I'm saying they're dumb. That's not what I'm saying. All right, but I'm just wondering if it's just kind of a misconception. If, like, Europe has places like this, America must have places like this, and we don't so much.
It's not that you go through these different...
Or if it's just, old things are spooky, let's make it a little old-fashioned-y looking.
Yeah, because you're in a dream, so, like, that is fine. It's just trying to figure out the timeline of, like, how old Ruvik was. I mean, technically that mansion could be, like, in... up to his date, but it's strange. It's
true. We never see it for real. We're just seeing Ruvik's representation of it in the dream.
And that's not even the most like convoluted thing, really.
Oh no, it gets
like in the game.
It gets a little worse.
But essentially, you do all that stuff in the past,
and then eventually you get to the point where you're like, we always see Beacon Mental Institution. We always see the lighthouse. Let's get to the lighthouse. Whatever landscape they end up in, there's always the lighthouse.
And they just that's like the place.
That's finally when they started addressing, like, hey, there's really something weird going on. Let's get there and see if we can figure out what it is.
All this teleporting is not that weird, but hey, look at that beacon and whatever. And then they get to the real city, like go to Crimson City, which is like super Inception, even more like the
more Inception and more 2012.
Yeah, there's like buildings that are like coming out of the ground. There's buildings,
and you'll
on
walk
the
around
side.
and like the ground will just shift and everything. And
it's very cool. I like that city a lot, except for the weird like water monsters that were like instant kills. They had to shoot bodies to distract them, and sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. And at the point where you're about to save Kidman from all those zombies, even though they're not really zombies, but I'm just gonna call them zombies because
I think their name is the Haunted.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's what they're called. But
well, that's a dumb name.
Well, what is it better than the Molded from 7?
Names are stupid. Everything is.
But you know they're not zombies, but they act like a zombie, and if it walks like a zombie and talks like a zombie.
I like that point in the game where they basically call out the title of the game. And we're talking about the evil within. I think that was the name of the chapter. It's not called the evil within. It's called the evil inside, or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's something
like
different.
That.
It's like, oh, they finally said the whatever of the
roll credits.
Yeah, it should be. It should like, it's always the evil within, Sebastian. And roll the credits. Yeah, and then so we get all that stuff that is happening, and you figure out that Ruvik's all behind this, and then you get to the lighthouse and stuff, and then eventually at the end of the city, you, Kidman, and Joseph are all together, and then eventually Kidman finds Leslie, and she wants to kill him, or at this point we don't know that she wants to kill him, but eventually
Leslie is running away from her and goes to Sebastian, and then Sebastian raises his gun to Kidman, Kidman raises her gun to him, and she's like, you've got to let me do this. Or something, and that's when it really becomes clear, like, Kidman's always been, like, a little cold and a little closed off, but she's obviously up to something.
Not that you know, because no one says anything in the game, so it's pretty normal for her to be,
kind of be like, I'm really unimpressed by what's going on. That's pretty much everybody in this game.
and then, like, the final thing is, you fight Ruvik's, like, giant brain monster.
Well, first you end up back where you began. Like, you're going through some of the areas back at the beginning. You're back in the hospital. You end up in the hallway where you see, where you saw Ruvik killing the police at the very beginning of the game.
Okay, so you
I feel like this is a terrible summary of the game.
I'm sure it's basically the plot points, just so we can get through all the even more convoluted things. And we are missing some things in between. Yeah, but basically, at this you get to the Beacon Hospital, which is where you began in the beginning of the game. And I don't know why that happened, because technically you're still, like, in the dream world. So you're not even, like, making it to... It's not like you made it to the present in the real world to make it to there, where Ruvik is, like, trapped.
Yeah.
Ruvik's brain has just always been in the hospital for some reason, because that's just where he wants to be. Because technically that's where they are in the real world. And I guess if you transport from someplace, you have to always be there. I don't know. Dreams are confusing, always. but you have like this showdown with like Ruvik, and it's a brain monster, and there's also like this really terrible stealth part. But the boss itself is like very easy, like the actual final boss. But there's like a lot of like chord rushes.
An important plot point that we haven't really addressed is that at a certain point, they're like, he wants Leslie. And they don't ever say Ruvik, but meaning Ruvik wants Leslie. And so at the end of the game, Leslie and Ruvik are both there. And Leslie walks up to Ruvik, and then Ruvik touches him and he turns into water, which is a little weird. But so at the end, like, Ruvik got what he wanted.
It seemed like because he was a brain. Well, I mean, at least in the dream world, it's implied that he's a brain, or is it? Do they say in the documents too that he's also a brain?
So this kind of gets into a little bit more of the convoluted stuff after, but in the real world, at some point, Ruvik was killed. Mobius, which is this organization that Kidman works for and is kind of behind a lot of stuff.
Umbrella.
Yeah, Mobius is pretty much Umbrella. They took his brain and they put it in the STEM machine because at some point because Ruvik helped build the STEM machine, and he had made it so the STEM machine only responded to his DNA, his genetic code. And so they killed him, and they took his brain, and they put his brain in the STEM machine to power STEM. That's why you're fighting a brain. So in the dream, Ruvik's projecting himself with a body, but I think as you get to the end and things just get crazier, he kind of ends up manifesting as what he physically is, which is just a brain.
You actually, like,
after you fight a brain monster with rocket launchers.
Right, and then eventually you, like, wake up in the fake tub before you actually get to reality and get out of the real tub, and to basically literally like smash his brain from a jar.
Yeah, and that's still in the fake world. You wake up in the real world, and Kidman's there, and a bunch of other Mobius people are around. And Mobius is a little shady, and Kidman works for them, and then she's telling you to just stay quiet. And I think she tries to get them to believe that you're dead so that they won't take you.
Yeah. And then, then that happens. Then he falls back asleep, and then he wakes up, and then then
all the other beds are empty, so Jimenez and Connolly had been in the beds, and they both died in the game.
Oh, they dead.
They're super dead. Leslie turned into water, but his body was gone. Joseph got shot by Kidman at some point, and it's very unclear if he was dead or not, but I think he was alive. I think it was kind of clarified in the Kidman DLC that he was alive, and so his body's also gone. But yours was left. And yours was left with Connolly and I believe Jimenez were both there still.
Yes, so you walk out and the police are there. And
you're back in the hospital that you walked into at the beginning with all the dead bodies, just like when you walked in at the beginning.
Yeah, and you get back up.
They're like, oh, detective, we're here. And he's like, just give me some real fresh air. And it was just like, man, aren't you there's going to be so many questions that you can't answer right now.
Yeah, why are these bodies dead?
And then you walk outside, and in the distance,
you
see Leslie walking away. And he turns around and kind of looks at you. And it's kind of like
teleports.
Is it Ruvik? It makes it implied that Ruvik got...
So, at this point... I was still unsure because a lot of horror movies like to end with is this really reality or what is this?
Pretty sure when I played it the first time, I was pretty sure we were still in the dream. It wasn't real still. But
because superpowers aren't real.
And it just seemed like a typical ending for, a horror game.
Well, actually, technically, he just looks away and then he's gone. He doesn't actually, you don't actually see him glitch.
You don't see him teleport. You just,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But still,
so technically, it could work.
It could work. But my assumption was the first time I played it, you're still in a dream. But now we know that there's a sequel, and when we watch the trailer, the sequel's like, you've got to go back. So it's kind of implying that, no, you did really get out.
Yeah, that
part. Go back, Kate.
that part I'm fine with you actually waking up at the very end. Yep. I'm just confused if the beginning is a dream or not. Like, what part of the game...
I used to think the beginning, when you're riding in the car with everybody, I used to think that was real. But this time, and after really reading the documents and looking at stuff, I don't think Sebastian was ever awake up until maybe the end of the game.
Yeah, because Ruvik doesn't have a body, so technically...
Ruvik doesn't have a body, so he could not actually have been there to stab him in the neck. He already had to be dreaming that. I don't believe there's actually superpowers in this world, so he couldn't have actually been teleporting. And if you read into Sebastian's journal, and you look at all those missing persons documents, the missing persons documents tie to people that Mobius has kidnapped and taken to work on their machine. And Sebastian's wife...
His wife.
I thought it was Mira. I think it's Myra, so I might say it wrong a couple times. But his wife, Moira, was a missing persons detective who investigated missing persons. And she kept investigating what happened to their daughter because there was a bad fire and their daughter died in the fire.
She got too close.
She started to insist that it was not an accident. It was something that had happened on purpose. And she kept investigating this. And then suddenly she disappeared. And she had sent a letter to Sebastian with all her research saying, I got too close, pretty much.
This was all in reading stuff. They don't say any of this in the game.
Not a thing. And so... Sebastian started to look for her. And, he tried to go to the police, and they're like, nah, she's not missing. You guys have been splitting apart after your daughter died. You drink too much. She probably just left you. But he keeps looking for her. And then in the game, eventually, I don't remember what chapter it is, you find a missing persons report for Sebastian that talks about how he went missing out looking for his wife. And then later on, you find a missing persons report for Joseph, who said he went missing while he was out looking for somebody. So I'm thinking Myra went looking for who killed her daughter, who she'd been getting too close to. She was taken by Mobius. Sebastian went looking for Myra. He got taken. Joseph went looking for his partner. And then he got taken because they were all getting too close to figuring out about Mobius and where all these missing people were going and everything that was happening. So I think at the beginning of the game, you're all already in STEM.
But then I wonder, are they going in like some kind of loop? Like, I'm confused about like how they were kidnapped and then put in to this like game. It's kind of weird how you're transported through all these places. It's like Ruvik just wants Leslie, and he gives you like ammunition and other stuff to like fight against him. It's just very hard how it's set up. And also the hospital, like people died at the hospital as you see at the very end. So if it's in a dream world at the beginning, who killed all these people?
Who killed all those people? That's what doesn't make sense to me. But it doesn't make sense that it was real at the beginning.
Because if you look for your missing persons, if he's trying to go after his wife, he wouldn't go to the hospital. He was just brought to the hospital because that's where like the machine was. He might have gone to
the hospital because he was following her clues. So if she went to the hospital, he might have eventually ended up there himself following her.
I guess.
And then the real thing with Myra is if you play the Kidman DLC, at the end, Kidman wakes up and she's talking to this lady who is a big shot at Mobius, and she's asking her to debrief and everything, and Kidman says, I can't right now, I need to get my head on straight, and the lady's like, that's fine. And then somebody calls her over and refers to her as Myra. And like Kidman, it's like, how many people can be called Myra? Kidman was wondering the same thing, is that Sebastian's wife? So, if it is his wife, and she disappeared getting too close to Mobius, did she always work for Mobius? Has she been, like, brainwashed and indoctrinated and is working for Mobius? Is she undercover working for Mobius? You also see Tatiana, the nurse from your safe room, is also there as a Mobius agent, so...
This game is very evident that there is probably some rush parts. There's a lot of things like, let's put this thing in here. Does that make sense with the story? I don't know. It's a dream, so that works. But then if you think about, again, the places you go to doesn't matter because you're in a dream. Mm-hmm. But some of the things you think about, like, how do those things work with the plots?
All the backstory about Sebastian and his wife and them missing, that's all in documents. The whole part about Ruvik programming the stem to his brainwaves, that's all in documents, and that's not even in the main game. That's in the DLC of the game. So, I mean, there's just so much important information. Because it's like, well, why is Ruvik a brain in the jar? Why would they keep his brain if they killed him? Well, they needed to. The stem machine wouldn't work without him, so they kept his brain. But they don't tell you that once in the game.
Hopefully the sequel is just... I'm okay with things being unclear and vague, but this is like completely like...
This is information you really needed to have to understand the game that is there and it's available to you if you pick up the documents, but I know a lot of people don't read documents when they play games.
So, I guess to close things off, because we could talk about this for such a long time, going around in circles about this or whatever. So I guess overall, my thoughts, I still like the game. If you have enough time and you really want to get the sequel, you probably don't need to play the first one to get the sequel. But, I mean, I have a lot of gripes with it, with some gameplay things. I still think it's definitely worth playing.
Yeah, I think we both like it still.
I'm not as high as I was initially. It definitely has aged in some bad parts. And the rose-tinted glasses has gone away, especially when you analyze the story. But I think it is still a good video game. So I guess we're both looking forward to the game. It'd be great, maybe, if we could finish that in some kind of timely manner and maybe do a spoiler cast on that and not have a 4-year spoiler cast going back for it.
At least we don't actually have to worry about spoiling people this time because they probably, if they haven't played it yet, they don't care.
Yeah, probably. Or they are like 4 years old.
If they can take a lot of the good stuff and just tweak some of the bad stuff, I think they're going to have another good game.
I think so too. Okay, well, thanks you for joining us in this weird, convoluted mess of a recap of what.
Yeah, we were all over the place.
Just like that game. But yes, thanks for joining us, and I'll be back. Who knows who else will be back?
Maybe see you for Evil Within 2 Spoilercast.
See you in your dreams. Did you know that was a Reaction Examiner video? If you liked it, you should subscribe to me to keep up with everything that I'm doing. Also, if you have some other interests, like sex for example, check out Tomops, which is a comedy sex podcast thing wherein my best friend and I check out the weird and abnormal and the erotic.
And of course, you should support me on Patreon because, hey, I want to make the channel better and I want your help to do so. Plus, if you want to check out my writing, check out Game Jerk, where I have archives and new stuff for all projects, okay? You can find all the stuff and more in the description with the links below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.